Waitress posed as a bride to shield the Mafia boss's daughter at the festival, the family's offer after midnight. Gullhaven was a city that never slept. It just changed its noise. Tonight, the noise was the Lanterntide Festival, and the city was feverish. The air, usually a sharp-edged mix of salt and diesel, was thick with the sulfur of street flares and the cloying, sticky, sweet smell of melted sugar from the boardwalk stalls. Down on the water, the famous parade of model ships, each one lit like a tiny, floating cathedral, drifted past the piers. The sound was a disorganized symphony. Brassy Latin horns from a street band clashed with the smoky jazz spilling from a club, and underneath it all, the deep, resonant call of the foghorns in the channel. June Marlowe felt the end of her shift in her feet. It was a specific throbbing ache that signaled her double at the Mariners' Hall was finally over. She was standing by the service station, unknotting the damp strings of her apron, when her manager, Sal, caught her eye. "June, one more thing," he called, gesturing her over. She approached, automatically wiping her hands on the apron she was trying to discard. "Sal, my shift ended 10 minutes ago." I know. It's the promo," he said, pointing toward the restaurant's main window. In the corner, a small, ridiculously ornate display had been set up, a miniature altar draped in white fabric, backlit by the chaos of the parade outside. "The Twilight Wedding Special. We need someone to be the bride for the photos, just for an hour. It draws the tourists in." June looked at the clock over the bar. It was already past 9. "Sal, I smell like clam chowder and stale beer." "You clean up fast," he dismissed, already turning away. "The dress is in the back office. It's just a display model." June Marlowe was not the kind of woman who daydreamed about wedding dresses. She was a woman who calculated her tips to the exact percentage required to cover her electric bill and the steadily increasing cost of her grandmother's care at the Sun Meadow home. She was pragmatic, her hands fast, her movements efficient. She moved toward the back office with the balanced economy of motion she had learned from a previous, rougher job as a bartender. That job had taught her to listen with her eyes, to catch the subtle shift in a man's shoulders that meant a problem was about to start. A brief, failed attempt at a nursing program years ago had left her with a certification in basic first aid and an unnerving ability to read panic in the human body. But mostly, her skills were honed by the relentless pace of waitressing. She had a memory that could hold complex, multi-course orders for 12 tops, and she instinctively cataloged the world around her. She counted the steps of the new busboy 7 steps from the kitchen to table 4, 9 to the patio, and she could, if the music lulled, read the lips of the couple arguing by the window. Tonight, all of Gullhaven was holding its breath. The rumors had been circulating for days, whispered over coffee counters and shouted in the early morning fish market. A truce, the Rivaro Syndicate, the family that owned the docks and everything that floated, and the Estrell outfit, who ran the transport that moved everything on wheels, were observing a ceasefire. It was a fragile, high-stakes peace, set to expire at the stroke of midnight. The Gullhaven police, underfunded and willfully outmatched, were conspicuously light on the main festival route, replaced by waves of private security. And somewhere in the shadows, the federal suits from OSCO, the Office of Strategic Contraband Oversight, were watching. OSCO never moved openly. They let the city play its games, waiting, always waiting, to set the board on fire. The parade was the centerpiece of this fragile truce. In a stunning display of confidence, Cassian Rivaro, the man who was the harbor, was allowing his daughter, Mira Rivaro, to ride the lead float. It was a statement of power. June pulled the display dress off the mannequin. It was heavy, the satin stiff and synthetic, the lace trim already scratchy. Ridiculous, she muttered to herself. Sal stuck his head through the door. Just smile, June. Look happy, like a bride. June managed a short, dry laugh. It's a sales gimmick. Sal, I get it. I'll smile. She zipped up the back of the dress, the fabric clinging uncomfortably in the humid, salty air. She was a prop. That was all. She stepped out to find the main hall buzzing, the promise of the festival drawing people in off the street. She started navigating the floor, smiling as instructed, while Sal tried to wrangle a local photographer. As she passed the service corridor, she paused to let two porters maneuvering a stack of banquet chairs go by. They were new. Not the usual guys. They were talking low, but June's hearing was sharp, trained to pick up a murmured "more water" from across a loud dining room. "The package is set," the first one said, his voice a low rumble. "Just has to move through sewer channel 5 before the Estrell boys realize the switch." The second one grunted, shifting the weight of the chairs as long as the payout matches the ticket. "Check the ticket," the first one said, an edge of impatience in his voice. "The anchor is rotated 13 degrees. That's the one. That's the confirmation." June processed the information automatically, the way she would an order for a steak. Medium rare, no dairy, gluten allergy, sewer channel 5, anchor 13 degrees. It meant nothing to her, but the intensity of the whisper made the hair on her arms stand up. It was the same tone men used at the bar just before a glass broke. She stepped onto the small viewing balcony of the Mariners' Hall, the cheap satin wedding dress pulling awkwardly at her shoulders. The photographer flashed a bulb in her face. June smiled, but her eyes were scanning the street below, the sea of faces, the bright lights. The wind shifted, coming hard off the harbor. For a moment, it cut right through the smell of the festival, silencing the sugar and the flares. It was a heavy, metallic wind, carrying the scent of engine oil from the Deepwater Channel, the smell of old iron, and something else, the faint, acrid tang of ozone. The parade was bright, the music was loud, but the wind told the truth. Tonight was not just a celebration, it was a countdown. The grand parade float, a skeletal schooner covered in thousands of glowing paper lanterns, drifted to a halt in front of the Mariners' Hall. Mira Rivaro, a young woman of about 19, stepped off the platform. She was tiny, swallowed by the noise and the crowd, her face pale under the colored lights. June, still trapped in the ridiculous satin dress by the window, watched her. Sal was bustling. Clearing a path, Mira was scheduled to use the hall's back rooms to change into her costume for the main event, the Fisher Goddess presentation. The moment Mira's foot touched the promenade, the atmosphere fractured. The upbeat Latin music from a nearby float died abruptly, cut off by a sound that was both older and more brutal, a heavy, pounding drumbeat, a troupe of performers, not on any published schedule, spilled into the street. Separating the float from the restaurant doors, they were billed as fire dancers, spinning torches that hissed and spat, but they moved with a jarring, aggressive precision. June's eyes narrowed. Her bartender's instincts, the ones that measured the cadence of trouble, flared. She watched their feet. The main parade band, 2 floats back, was playing a fast, swinging jazz in a 4/4 time. The drums of the new troupe were hammering a frantic, complex 6/8 rhythm. The dancers were moving to the drums, not the music. Their steps were coordinated, deliberate, and completely out of sync with the rest of the festival. It was not a performance. It was an invasion. They used their torches to create a wall of thick, acrid smoke, and a series of handheld flares popped, blinding the crowd. People screamed and surged back, creating a pocket of sudden, violent emptiness around Mira. 3 of the dancers broke formation, their faces painted like grinning skeletons. They moved through the smoke, heading straight for the hall's entrance. Sal raised his hands, shouting something about the schedule. They shoved him to the pavement. Mira was frozen in the doorway, the light from the hall pinning her against the chaos. One of the men lunged. He was not reaching to grab. His hand was clenched around a black, metallic loop with 2 silver prongs, a shock collar. He was aiming for her neck, to incapacitate and drag. June did not have time to think. She only had time to act. Her first aid training screamed, "Protect the head." Her street-level survival screamed, "Break the line of attack." She tore the cheap elbow-length veil from her own head. "Mira," she shouted. The girl turned. June lunged forward, throwing the veil over Mira's head like a net, using the fabric to snag the attacker's wrist. She yanked Mira backward, spinning her through the main doors. "Kitchen now!" They crashed through the swinging steel doors, the heat and smell of the kitchen hitting them. Behind them, the men slammed into the restaurant lobby. June heard glass break. Without breaking stride, June grabbed the closest, heaviest object. It was a multi-tiered stainless steel tray stand, loaded with the remains of a 3-tier strawberry cream cake. It was heavy, awkward, and perfect. She spun, using her full body weight, and hurled it back toward the swinging doors. It crashed, a messy wall of metal, wire, and frosting, blocking the entrance just as the first man tried to shove his way through. He roared in frustration. "The back door," June yelled, pulling Mira through the maze of hot tables and startled cooks. They burst out into the narrow, dark alley that ran behind the restaurant. The air was cold, smelling of stale grease and the low-tide salt of the harbor. They ran and hit a wall. It was a dead end, a 10-foot chain-link fence, topped with a curl of barbed wire, blocked the alley from the street. The pounding from the kitchen door was frantic. They were trapped. Mira slid down the brick wall, hyperventilating. "We are trapped! Oh God, they're going to kill us!" June stood in the center of the alley, her heart hammering. The shouts of the men were on the other side of the door. The roar of the parade, the music, the people. The safety was just 20 feet away, on the other side of the fence. They were looking for a girl in a float costume. They were not looking for a bride. "Get up," June said. Her voice was sharp, cutting through Mira's panic. "We cannot." "Get up." June grabbed Mira's hand, lacing their fingers together. Tight. "They are looking for a target. We are going to be a spectacle." She smoothed the front of her own satin dress. She adjusted the veil she had somehow managed to keep hold of, fixing it back on her head. Her hands were shaking, but her movements were sure. "What are you doing?" Mira whispered, her voice trembling. "I am being the bride." June took a deep breath, pulling Mira toward the mouth of the alley. "And you," she said, looking at Mira's pale, terrified face, "are my bridesmaid. Now, look happy." She did not wait for an answer. She stepped out of the shadows and straight into the brightest lights of the parade. She yanked Mira with her, shouting at the top of her lungs, her voice infused with a note of perfect, theatrical panic. Make way for the bride. We are late." The effect was instantaneous. The crowd, already drunk on spectacle, saw exactly what June intended them to see. A bride, late for her own wedding, dragging her friend through the street. A roar went up, but this time it was a cheer. People clapped, they whistled, they parted, creating a path. "Go, honey!" a woman yelled, lifting her beer. "He's waiting." June did not run. She surged. She moved with the crowd, using their bodies as a shield, keeping Mira tucked on her far side, her head down. The fake dancers burst from the alley, their eyes scanning, frantic. They saw the sea of people, the flashing lights, the floats, but the girl in the float costume was gone. The bride and her bridesmaids, swallowed by the celebration, were already moving away. June kept moving, her heart a cold stone in her chest. She needed security. She needed the police. She saw one of the dancers, his face paint streaked with sweat, speaking furiously into a radio. He was too far away to hear, but she watched his mouth. She read the words forming under the flashing neon. Pier 3. Get to Pier 3. Pier 3. That was the Estrell line. That was a trap. She looked up the street, 2 blocks away. The parade route curved past the massive granite steps of the old Harbor Line Church. It was always the densest security point of any city event, the place where the Gullhaven police and the private guards massed to protect the historic landmark. She changed direction, pulling Mira hard to the left, nearly tripping over the hem of the ridiculous dress. "Stay with me. We are going to church." As they hit the bottom step, a wall of men in dark, tailored suits cut through the crowd, moving with a fluid, deadly speed that the fake dancers had lacked. They were professionals. They formed a tight circle around June and Mira, their hands inside their jackets. They were Rivaro's men. And they were 30 seconds too late. Far down the street, on a secure rooftop overlooking the entire scene, Cassian Rivaro lowered his binoculars. His face was granite. He had watched the chaos, the kitchen door, the blocked alley. And he had watched as a complete stranger. A woman in a cheap wedding dress had pulled his daughter from the fire, wrapped her in the insane logic of the festival, and delivered her to the only safe zone on the route. As if summoned by the resolution, the air was finally split by the high-low wail of official sirens. Not the local police. These were the thrumming, authoritative sirens of Osco. The federal vehicles did not enter the parade route. They screeched to a halt at the main intersections, their lights flashing, locking down the entire perimeter of the festival. The message was clear. The truce was over, the city was now a cage, and June Marlowe, in her borrowed wedding dress, was standing on the church steps, locked inside it with the Rivaro air. The Rivaro men did not ask questions. They formed a silent, moving wall of dark suits, separating June and Mira from the astonished civilians and the few local police on the church steps. The absurd, cheap satin of the wedding dress felt heavy and soaked, sticking to June's skin as they were guided, not pushed, into the back of a waiting sedan. The car was heavy, the doors closing with the sound of a vault. It moved through the Osco locked perimeter without slowing, through checkpoints that seemed to melt away at the sight of the car's grille. They left the neon chaos of the festival and plunged into the working end of the harbor, where the streets smelled of salt, iron, and diesel. The car stopped at the Oyster House. It was not a home. It was a fortress disguised as industrial history, a massive 3-story brick warehouse, its walls dark with age, looked out over the black, churning water of the bay. The only concessions to modernity were the smoked glass windows that ran the length of the top floor and the solid steel-reinforced door that opened before they had even stopped. Inside, the noise of the city vanished. The air was warm, smelling of old timber, polished leather, and the clean, cold scent of the deep sea. They were taken up a spiral staircase of black iron, their footsteps echoing in the vast, open space. Cassian Rivaro was waiting. He stood before a floor-to-ceiling window, a living portrait of the entire, frantic, lantern-lit harbor below him. He was a man carved from the harbor's granite, his presence filling the room. He did not turn when they entered, but his voice rumbled, low and resonant. "Mira?" He crossed the room in 2 strides, his hands, large and scarred, landed on his daughter's shoulders. His eyes, dark and analytical, scanned her for any harm. "I am fine, Papa," Mira said, her voice small. "I am fine. She saved me." Only then did Cassian's gaze shift. It landed on June, a heavy, physical weight. His eyes took in the cheap satin, the veil askew, the perspiration and street grime on her face. He was assessing her, cataloging her, weighing her. "My daughter is correct," he said. The words were simple, factual. "You saved her life. My family is in your debt." He paused, the silence stretching. The gratitude was a formality, a preface to the real question. "Now, you will tell me who sent you to play the bride." The question was not an accusation. It was a blade, sharp and precise. June felt the last dregs of adrenaline curdle into exhaustion. She untangled the veil from her hair, her hands steady. "Nobody sent me. Mr. Rivaro, I'm a waitress at the Mariners' Hall. My manager had me wear this." She plucked at the satin, for a promotional photo, a gimmick to sell wedding packages. Cassian's expression did not change. A remarkable coincidence. "A terrible shift," June countered, her voice hard. She was tired, not intimidated. "When those men attacked, we were trapped in the back alley. The fence was locked. They were breaking through the kitchen door." She held his gaze. "I made a choice. They were looking for her, the girl from the float. They were not looking for a bride late for her wedding. The only way out was to use the crowd." Mira stepped forward. her hand finding June's. "It is true, Papa. She threw the veil over my head. She pulled me, and she shouted for people to make way. They cheered for us." A flicker of something, not a smile, but an easing of the granite softened Cassian's eyes. He had expected a pawn from Astrel, or a plant from Osco. He had not expected a civilian with tactical instincts. He was impressed by the raw nerve, by the immediate understanding of psychology and theater. It was pure street-level brilliance. "You read the situation," he murmured, more to himself than to her. He turned back to the window, the city lights reflecting in the glass. "The Astrel family are animals, but they are not usually this bold. They intended to take you, Mira, to force my hand." "It was the fire dancers," June said, the memory clicking into place. Their rhythm was off. They were marching to a different drum, not the festival music. Cassian nodded. They were not Estrella's men. They were hired. Estrella was just the pickup team. I saw the signal. "Pier 3, June said. Cassian turned fully, his eyebrows raising. "I saw one of them," June clarified. "I read his lips. He said Pier 3. "They used my daughter as bait," Cassian said, his voice dropping into a register of cold fury, "to make me move my assets, to expose my routes, to see how I would react." He glanced at a heavy clock on the mantel. It was 10:40, and the truce ends at midnight. His hand went to a telephone on his desk. "Leo," he snapped into the receiver. "No, you hold your position. No one moves, no one fires, not until I give the word." He slammed it down. "They are not the only ones watching," he said, gesturing to the harbor. "Osco has the entire channel locked down. They just sent their terms." He tapped a formal-looking memo on his desk. "An ultimatum. If a single shot is fired by either family before 12 o'clock, they will clean the docks. They are trying to force a war so they can sweep up the pieces." June processed the layers: a mafia war, a federal trap, and a midnight deadline. She was standing in the command center, wearing a $500 prop. She had one priority, one anchor in the storm. "I need to make a phone call." The demand, so domestic, so normal, cut through the tension. Cassian looked at her. "It is my grandmother," June said, her voice suddenly tight. "She is at Sun Meadow Home. I call her every night at 11:30. If I do not, she worries. She gets agitated. I need to tell her I am okay." This, more than the men with shock collars, was what made her hands tremble. Cassian studied her. Seeing the truth of it, this was her leverage. This was what she fought for. He gave a slow, deep nod. "Sun Meadow Home on Arbor Street." June's head snapped up. "How did you—" "I know my city. Miss Marlowe." He turned as a woman in a severe black dress entered the room, moving with silent efficiency. "Ariella, you will take Miss Marlowe to the Bay guest room. She will need a change of clothes." "Yes, sir," Ariella Quince, the housekeeper, replied. "And Ariella," Cassian added, "place 2 men at Sun Meadow Home. Full protection. Effective immediately. I want them to be invisible. We are protecting the resident, not alarming her." The guest room was a large, beautiful space, its windows looking directly over the dark water. It was quiet, safe, and June knew without checking that the door was guarded. She was a guest, but she was not free. After Ariella left, June sat on the edge of the bed, the stiff dress crackling. She made the call, forcing her voice into a warm, calm register, telling her grandmother that the festival was beautiful, that work was fine, that she loved her. After she hung up, she finally let herself collapse. She peeled the dress off, desperate to be out of it. As she did, something sharp dug into her wrist, caught in the cheap lace cuff. She pulled it free. It was a paper drink ticket from the Mariners' Hall, snagged from a table when she had run. She had not even noticed it. She looked at the logo. It was the restaurant's anchor, but it was tilted at a sharp, unnatural angle. She remembered the words of the porters in the hallway, the whisper she had filed away. "The anchor is rotated 13 degrees. It was not just a drink ticket. It was a key. It was the code. Ariella returned with a tray. It held not clothes, but a single glass of water and a plain, dark silk robe. June was standing by the window, holding the small, tilted anchor drink ticket, when the door opened again. It was not Ariella. It was Cassian. He entered the room, and it seemed to shrink, the air becoming denser. He had removed his suit jacket, in his shirt sleeves, with his cuffs rolled back. He looked less like a CEO and more like what he was, a man who worked the docks with his hands long before he owned them. "Your grandmother is safe," he said, his voice a low, quiet statement of fact. "My men are in place. They are invisible." June did not turn from the window. "What does that mean? Mr. Rivaro, safe from what? From you?" "From Estrell. From Osco. From the chaos your actions tonight have pulled you into." He walked toward her, stopping a few feet away. "You are no longer just a waitress who wore a prop dress." "I did not ask for this," June said, her voice flat. "I just wanted to finish my shift." "You did not. And yet, here we are." He looked at the clock on the wall. It was 11:15. "In 45 minutes, the truce ends. The festival will be over, and this harbor will become a war zone. Estrell will move, Osco will move, and I," he said, "will move." "What does this have to do with me?" "You, Miss Marlowe, are my only solution," he said, "which brings me to the offer." He let the words hang, a heavy, deliberate silence. "I am making the family's offer after midnight." June turned, her eyes holding his. "I'm not family, and it is not yet midnight." "A technicality," Cassian said, a ghost of appreciation in his voice. "There is a ceremony, part of the lantern tide. It is old, older than this city, the vow before the sea. It is a symbolic promise of peace and prosperity, made by the harbor families. It is scheduled for 15 minutes past midnight." "A ceremony is not going to stop men with shock collars." "No," he agreed, "but tradition will. The vow is a sacred truce, by harbor law, which is the only law that matters here. The participants of the vow are granted absolute, untouchable passage. No business, no violence, no interference can touch them, especially," he paused, "the bride." June's stomach went cold. "You want me to do it again? To go back out there? To be the bride?" "Yes. You will stand with me at the Harborline Church, and you will play the part you played so well tonight. You will be the Rivaro bride, and as long as you are, Estrell cannot touch you, or Mira, or me, without breaking a law so old it would turn every family in this city against them. They will not dare." "That is your offer. You want me to be a target, a human shield." "I am offering you a new life," he said, his voice dropping, "in exchange for your performance, for this 1 hour of your life. The Rivaro Harbor Trust will assume all financial responsibility for the Sun Meadow home, effective immediately. The cost of your grandmother's care, her medical bills, her comfort, all of it, for the rest of her life, will be our responsibility. You will never have to calculate a tip again. You will be free." It was a perfect, brutal calculation. He had found her anchor, the one thing she valued, and he had put a price on it. June looked down at the drink ticket in her hand, the tilted anchor. A key. She thought of her grandmother's paper-thin hands, of the bills that piled up, of the constant, grinding fear of her next shift, her next rent check, and now this man was offering to wipe it all away, for a performance. "If I do this," June said slowly, her voice quiet but clear, "I am not your prop. I am not your shield. I am your partner." Cassian's eyebrows rose. "You believe Estrell was set up. You believe those men were hired. I agree." She held up the drink ticket. "This is a key. The anchor is rotated 13 degrees. It is a code. The men who took the chairs at the restaurant, the ones who were not your men or Estrella's, they were using this. They were talking about Sewer Channel 5. Cassian was completely still, his focus on her total. "I am a waitress. Mr. Rivaro, I have a good memory. I see the details. I know how the back of house works. I know how vendors cheat, how they move products, how they cover their tracks. That is how your harbor works. Is it not a big, dirty restaurant? "What is your condition?" he asked. "I want access, right now, to every order slip, every vendor invoice, every kitchen schedule, every work roster for the entire Lanterntide Festival. All of it, the porters, the ice delivery, the linen service. If I am going to walk into a trap, I am going to know who built it." He looked at her for a long, heavy 10 seconds. He saw the steel under the exhaustion. She was not asking for protection. She was demanding ammunition. "Ariella," he called. He did not raise his voice, but the sound cut through the house. The housekeeper appeared instantly. "Bring Miss Marlowe the festival ledgers, all of them, and my personal files from Corsair Dockworks." "Yes, sir." "You will have what you need," he said to June. "But understand this. The moment that clock strikes 15 past midnight, the ceremony is over. The sacred truce dissolves. Osco will be free to act, and they will use Estrella's chaos as a legal screen to grab anyone they want, including you. You will have your freedom, but we must survive the next hour to claim it." The door opened, and Mira rushed in. "Papa, I'm coming with you. I can help. I can be a lookout." "No," June and Cassian said at the exact same time. June turned to the girl, her voice softer but firm. "You are the target, Mira. Your face is the one they know. The safest place for you is here, with Ariella. Do not argue. We do not have time." Mira looked at her father, who nodded. She deflated, but she obeyed. Ariella returned, not with ledgers, but with a dress. It was not a prop. It was a simple, bias-cut sheath of heavy white silk. With it was a small, delicate mesh of lace. Not a veil, but a screen. "A pragmatic bride," June murmured, touching the fabric. As she changed, Cassian watched the harbor. "We will have to practice," he said. "Practice what?" June asked, stepping out, the silk moving like water around her. "Our signals." He held up his hand. "If I touch my thumb to my palm like this, you do not ask questions, you do not pause, you retreat, you find Ariella's men." He then reached out and, very gently, his fingers warm, closed his hand around her wrist. The contact was electric, a jolt of pure, physical reality. "If I do this," he said, his voice low, "it means we change the route, instantly. We move left, we move right, but we do not continue on the path. Do you understand?" June nodded, her throat dry. He was holding her wrist, his grip firm but not painful. It was not a gesture of control. It was a transfer of information. The ceremony was no longer a performance. It was a survival exercise. The ledgers, invoices, and rosters were not delivered in a neat stack. They were dumped on the long, polished mahogany table in the center of the room. It was a mountain of paper, a blizzard of details. It was, to June, a language she understood perfectly. She did not sit. She moved around the table, her hands flying, sorting the paper into piles with the speed of a seasoned card dealer. Cassian stood by the fireplace, watching her, a glass of water in his hand, untouched. He was a man of broad strokes, of force, and of will. He was watching a woman who lived in the margins, in the subclauses, in the fine print. "I am not just a waitress," she muttered, repeating her own words, her mind racing. "It is a big, dirty restaurant." Her brain was on fire, connecting the disparate facts, the tilted anchor, 13 degrees, Channel 5, the fake porters. "The anchor is the code," she said aloud, her voice sharp. "But the tilt is the key. 13 degrees. It is not a rotation. It is an instruction, a coordinate. It is a specific bay or a specific hatch." She grabbed a manifest from the pile. "Corsair Dockworks. They are a vendor. I have seen their trucks at the hall. They deliver ice and specialty linens." "They service the entire harbor," Cassian said, his voice a low rumble. "Clean, as far as we know." "No vendor is clean," June shot back, not looking up. "They just have good accountants." She flipped through the Corsair invoices. "Here, an order for 200 pounds specialty ice block form, and another, 40 units strawberry pastry, and another, 100 units strawberry pastry, all going to different maintenance hatches. Hatches 3, 9. and 12. She looked up at him, her eyes bright with a cold, clear logic. Who orders 40 strawberry cakes for a sewer junction? Mr. Rivaro, this is not food. It is a label. It is a shell for another product. This is how they move the real package. Before he could answer, she found a price list, a laminated sheet with codes. She ran her finger down the list. MIB, $80 a pound. She tapped the paper. What is MIB? Mint basil, Cassian said, stepping closer. An herb order for the festival kitchens. June shook her head, a small, tight smile on her face. It was the smile of a bartender who has just caught a customer trying to pass a fake ID. No, it is a code. M, B, mint, basil, M, B, Monday, barge. Cassian went still. The barge schedule is public. The Monday barge is not due until next week. The festival runs on the Tuesday's schedule. Exactly, June said. Osco is watching the festival. They are watching the Tuesday's schedule. They are not watching the Monday's schedule. So your traders, whoever they are running their entire operation in reverse. They are using the off day to move their product right under everyone's nose. She was digging through the papers again, her energy frantic, focused. They are not just moving product, they are setting a trap. They needed Mira, but they needed a place to take her. She found a crumpled invoice, a duplicate copy, snagged from a clipboard. Here, a final delivery, a special order, Nightinglass 7. She looked up. What is Nightinglass 7? The blood drained from Cassian's face. For the first time, June saw a crack in the granite. The glass trawler, he said, his voice flat. It is the city's maritime museum, a tourist trap. But June pressed. But it has a private addition, a long, elevated glass walkway that connects the museum to the old embankment. It is private, it is secure. My father helped fund it. We call it the Nightinglass. And Platform 7, he said, the pieces locking into place, is a private dock, directly beneath it, hidden from the street and the water. June straightened. The puzzle was complete. They were not taking Mira to Pier 3. That was a diversion. They were taking her to Nightinglass 7. She walked past him, her bare feet silent on the wood floor. Where is your kitchen? He simply pointed. She went through a service door and found a vast steel-clad kitchen, as large as the one at the Mariners' Hall, but silent and spotless. On the wall was what she needed, a full, laminated map of the harbor, marked with delivery routes and vendor drop-off points. She grabbed it, pulled it off the wall, and returned to the main room. She threw the map on top of the invoices and handed it to Ariella, who had been standing silently by the door. This is your escape route. If this goes wrong, if the church is a trap, you get Mira and you take this map. The Corsair routes. She tapped the colored lines. Will be the only ones clear tonight. You use them. Ariella nodded, her eyes wide, taking the map. June turned back to the table, to the last piece, the authority, the signatures. Who signed off on these, she demanded. She flattened the Corsair invoices. The small orders, the ice, were signed by a logistics manager, but the strawberry pastry orders, the ones for the hatches, were different. The signature was clean, precise, and powerful. Elias Crane. He is my counsel, Cassian said, his voice dangerously quiet. He has been with my family for 30 years. He was my father's most trusted man. And he is the only person, June said, tapping the signature, who has the legal authority to approve a vendor contract and the tactical knowledge of your private docks. He's the leak. He set up the attack on Mira. He's using Estrella, and he is working with Osco to deliver you both to them. Cassian's face was a mask of thunder. The loyalty was at war with the logic. It is a lie. Then let's prove it, June said. The clock on the mantel read 11:40. The truce is almost over. The real moves happen after midnight. He thinks I am just a random waitress. He thinks you are running scared. He will be at Nightinglass 7, waiting to rescue Mira after Estrella supposedly botches the job. He will be the hero who delivers your daughter. And you, straight into Osco's hands. "What do you propose?" Cassian whispered. "We set a trap of our own," June said. "We place one more order, a special order, one miniature wedding cake. Deliver it to Nightinglass 7. But the time is critical. Not now. We time the delivery for 10 minutes past midnight." "After the ceremony," Cassian breathed, seeing it. "After the truce ends." "He will think the plan failed, that I am with you," June said. "He will have to move. He will have his men at the church, but he will be at the Nightinglass to manage the cleanup." "He will be there," Cassian agreed. He grabbed the phone and barked a series of codes, orders for a special pastry, Tier 1, delivery for 12:10, location Nightinglass 7. He hung up. The trap was set. He looked at June, who was fastening the simple lace mesh to her hair. The clock began to chime the hour. 12 o'clock. Midnight. "It is time." Cassian Rivaro said. He held out his arm, not as a gentleman, but as a partner. "The truce is over. Let's go and make our vows." June took his arm. The silk of her dress was cold, but his arm was a solid, warm bar of iron. They walked out of the oyster house, into the night. They left the oyster house, stepping not into the street but onto a private wooden walkway that skirted the water. The night had turned. The festive, sugar and sulfur air had been scoured away, replaced by the damp, heavy weight of an approaching storm. The wind, which had been a breeze, now came in sharp, sudden gusts. It shrieked off the harbor, snapping the festival banners like whips. "The squall is early," Cassian said, his voice a low growl against the rising noise. The Harbor Line Church was still 3 blocks away, across an exposed promenade. As he spoke, the sky opened. The first drops of rain, cold and hard as pellets, began to lash the pavement. It was not a shower, it was an assault. He did not hesitate. The walk was now impossible. They would arrive looking like survivors, not celebrants. He changed course, his hand gripping June's elbow, not the signal, but a necessary anchor, and pulled her toward the dark, massive silhouette of the glass trawler museum. Tucked beside its granite foundation, invisible from the main street, was a small, dark structure. It was not a house, but a boathouse, its walls made of thick, reinforced glass. Cassian pushed the heavy door open. Inside, it was instantly, shockingly silent. The roar of the wind and the sea was reduced to a deep, drumming vibration against the glass. The room was dark, lit only by the frantic, sweeping lights of the harbor buoys and the distant, blurred colors of the festival. It smelled of teak oil, cured canvas, and the cold, clean scent of the deep sea. "We will wait for the worst of it to pass," Cassian said. He released her elbow, but the warmth of his grip remained. He moved to the window, a shadow against the storm, watching the rain lash the churning water. "We cannot arrive soaked. It would break the illusion." He turned, and the colored lights cast strange, moving shadows on his face. "We must use the time, the vow. It is old, specific. You must say the words exactly, or they will know it is a performance." He began to recite it, a simple text about the sea and the land, about the anchor and the tide, about commitment, but his voice, usually so steady, faltered on the last line. He stopped, his throat tight. June watched him, the man who commanded the harbor, who faced down federal agencies and rival outfits, looked utterly lost. "He used to say them," Cassian said, his voice so low she barely heard him over the rain. He was looking out at the black water, but he was seeing another time. "My father, he stood on this spot. This was his boathouse. Long before the museum was built, he brought me here during the festivals. He believed in the old ways, in the vow." He turned to her, and the armor he wore, the cold control, was gone. His eyes were unguarded, filled with a raw, ancient pain. "He made me promise I would change this harbor, that I would make it clean." A small, grim smile touched his lips. Not legal, perhaps, but clean, fair, a place that kept its word. He looked down at his own hands, clenching and unclenching, and Elias. Elias was standing right next to him when he made me promise. He heard the vow. The betrayal was not just business, it was blasphemy. June felt an impulse she could not name. It was not a pity, it was recognition. This was not a mafia boss. This was just a man, standing in the ruins of his faith. She stepped closer. The silk of her dress whispered on the stone floor. He was wearing a dark vest over his white shirt. The wind on the walk had mussed his hair, and the collar of his vest was slightly askew. "You are going to keep your promise," she said, her voice quiet but certain. She reached up, her fingers light, and straightened the collar. Her thumb brushed the fabric, and beneath it she felt the hard ridge of an old scar, just above his collarbone. It was a small, white line, almost invisible in the dim light. She touched it, a feather-light, instinctive brush. Cassian's breath hitched. He did not move, but his eyes locked on hers. He captured her hand, his fingers wrapping around her wrist, stopping her movement. His thumb traced the pulse point on her skin, which was hammering. He looked at her as if seeing her for the first time, not as a waitress, not as a bride, but as the only other person in the storm. The air in the boathouse became too small. It was charged, electric, thick with the rain outside and the tension inside. He did not pull her. She did not lean away. They moved together, a magnetic pull that had been building since she had read his lips on the street. The first kiss was not gentle. It was a collision. It was desperate, fueled by the adrenaline of the night, the shared danger, the profound betrayal, the ticking clock. It was a kiss of frustration and sudden, stunning recognition. His mouth was hard on hers, demanding, and she met him with equal force, her hand still trapped against his chest, her fingers splayed over his heart. Then, as quickly as it began, the desperation eased. The kiss slowed, deepened, changed. It became a discovery. His hand left her wrist, sliding up her arm to her neck, his fingers tangling in the damp hair at her nape. He tilted her head, and the kiss became searching. A question and an answer, a drowning man finding air. June's other hand came up, resting on his shoulder. She wound her arms around his neck, pulling herself closer, molding her body to his. His other arm found her back, his large hand spreading wide over the thin silk, pulling her against the solid, warm wall of his chest until there was no space left between them. His vest was rough, an anchor in the chaos. The delicate lace mesh on her hair brushed against his jaw. They breathed each other in. She tasted the salt of the harbor on his lips, and he tasted the cool rain on hers. He broke the kiss, but only to move his mouth to her jaw, her temple, his breath hot against her skin. He rested his forehead against hers. They stood like that, in the center of the glass house, the storm raging around them, their breath mingling, their hearts pounding in the same frantic, unsteady rhythm. His hand was a warm, heavy, possessive weight on the small of her back. A nearby clock tower began to chime the quarter hour. 15 minutes past midnight, the time for the vow. "After midnight," June whispered, her voice husky, her eyes still closed. "After this is over, we go back to being strangers, if that is what is needed." Cassian opened his eyes. He looked down at the woman in his arms, the woman who had deciphered his entire world in less than an hour. "No," he said, his voice a gravelly promise. "After midnight, you choose." He held her for 1 second longer, a lifetime in the pressurized silence. He felt the tremor in her hands, and she felt the coiled tension in his shoulders. It was a vow made before the vow, sealed in the eye of the storm. Reluctantly, they separated. The air rushed back in, cold and sharp. June stepped back, her knees weak, but she did not falter. Her face was flushed, her eyes bright, perhaps with the rain, perhaps with unshed tears. She reached up and pulled the lace mesh back into place. Her hands, the waitress's hands, surprisingly steady. Outside, the festival, unaware of the squall or the truce, launched a barrage of paper fireworks from a cannon on the pier. They exploded silently against the glass, a cascade of colored confetti in the rain, a celebration for a war that had not yet begun. Cassian reached down, retrieved his suit jacket from where it had fallen, and shrugged it on. The armor was back in place. He was the boss again. She was the bride. "It is time," he said. He opened the door of the boathouse, and the roar of the wind and the sea rushed in. They stepped out into it, together. The rain had eased to a cold, persistent drizzle by the time they reached the steps of the Harbor Line Church. The ceremony was not inside, but on the wide, wind-swept plaza overlooking the water, just as tradition dictated. The crowd from the festival had thinned, but a core group remained harbor workers, old-timers, and the silent, watchful members of the Rivaro and Astrell families, separated by a 10-yard stretch of wet stone. And Elias Crane? He stood near the front, his expression one of perfect, sober concern. He was the loyal counsel, the stable hand. A small, symbolic altar had been set up. Cassian led June to it, his hand a solid, unmoving presence on her arm. The wind pulled at the silk of her dress, but she felt anchored by his weight. A local dignitary, a man June did not recognize, began the rites in a voice that struggled against the wind. When it was her turn, June stepped forward. The words Cassian had taught her were on her lips, but she gave them her own weight, her own meaning. "We stand between the tide and the land," and she began, her voice carried by a small, wind-buffeted microphone. "And we make our vow." Her eyes scanned the crowd, her gaze sliding past the faces until it rested on Elias. He was watching Cassian, not her. "We promise to honor the anchor," she said, emphasizing the word, "which holds us fast." She was speaking to Ariella, who was listening on a secure line, confirming the escape route. "We promise to respect the backing wind, which guides us home." She watched Elias. He was shifting, his weight moving from foot to foot. He checked his pocket watch. It was 12:17. He was getting nervous. "And we promise," June finished, her voice rising with clarity, "to find the still water." She held his gaze. "Even when the storm rages, we seek the still water." Elias, who had been focused on Cassian, now turned his attention fully to her. His eyes narrowed. He had caught the emphasis. It was too precise. He looked at her, truly seeing her for the first time, not as a prop, but as a variable. He muttered something, a curse. June read his lips. It was clear, sharp, and panicked. Channel 5, right now. He was calling it off or calling it in. It did not matter. The trap was sprung. As if summoned by his silent command, a commotion erupted from the direction of the glass trawler. Shouts, the sound of running feet. A man in an Astrell coat burst from the alley near the Nightinglass walkway, followed by two others. They were running away from the museum. And right behind them, moving with the brutal, impersonal efficiency of a federal operation, came the OSCO agents. They emerged in full tactical gear, their presence sucking the air from the plaza. They had been waiting. They had been poised for the pastry delivery signal. They were exactly on time, which was, as June knew, the surest sign of a setup. They were not there to stop a crime. They were there to manage the transaction. Elias had planned for Astrell's failed abduction. He had not planned for OSCO to show up before he could secure the package. Cassian felt the tension snap. His hand, which had been on June's arm, moved to her back, his fingers pressed, the signal for retreat, thumb to palm. "We go now." June did not move. She subtly shook her head, a movement so small only he could feel it. She leaned toward him, her lips brushing the shell of his ear, her voice a whisper hidden by the wind. "Not yet. We're missing the last piece." "June," he hissed, his voice a low warning. "He has to move," she whispered back. "He has to commit." As if she had willed it, a small figure broke from the shadows near the church rectory. It was Mira. She was walking onto the plaza, her face a mask of practiced, believable confusion. "Papa," she called out, her voice trembling just enough. "What is happening?" Ariella said to wait. It was a masterful performance. Mira had refused to be a passive target. She was making herself the bait. Elias Crane saw his opening. The original plan had collapsed. But Mira was here. He could salvage this. He could still be the hero. "Mira!" he shouted, his voice ringing with false panic. He shoved his way through the stunned onlookers, brushing past the OSCO agents. "Get back! It is not safe!" He grabbed Mira's arm. "I will get you to safety," he said, pulling her. "This way. The route is clear." He was not taking her toward the Rivaro cars. He was pulling her toward the alley, toward the old embankment, toward the Nightinglass walkway. The route he knew. The route he had set for the abduction. "No!" Mira cried, digging in her heels, playing the part. It was perfect. Ariella, positioned in a window overlooking the embankment, had a clear shot. The hidden microphone on Mira's coat was live. The cameras in the alley were rolling. Elias was not just rescuing Mira, he was narrating his own treason. His voice, caught on the audio, giving panicked instructions that perfectly matched the Channel 5 and Nightinglass intel. The OSCO team leader, a man with a hard, impassive face, finally moved. He did not go after Elias. He moved toward Cassian. "Mr. Rivaro, for your daughter's protection, we are taking her into federal custody." He was rescuing her, too. "On what grounds?" June said, stepping directly in front of Cassian. The silk dress snapped around her legs. "Ma'am, this is a federal—" "On what grounds?" she repeated. "Under Gullhaven City Charter. Article 9, Section C, all harbor assets, including private families, have right of first refusal on private security. You cannot protect her without his consent. Show me the warrant." The agent stared at her. There was no Article 9. Section C. It was a perfect bureaucratic fiction. It was the strawberry pastry of legal arguments. It was a bluff, and it was brilliant. "I do not need a warrant to secure a civilian in a combat zone," the agent growled. "This is not a combat zone, officer," June said, her voice dripping cold. "It is a wedding ceremony, and you are interrupting." The agent was speechless. He was new to Gullhaven. He did not know the local rules, and he did not know if this insane woman was bluffing. He hesitated. The hesitation was all they needed. Cassian's phone, held in his left hand, vibrated. He glanced at the screen, a single word from Ariella. "Acquired. The audio, the video, the proof." He looked up, his eyes finding June's. A slow, dangerous smile touched his lips. He pressed a button on the side of his phone, a simple command to the sound technician still running the festival PA system 2 blocks away. "You are right, officer," Cassian said, his voice booming into the microphone June had just used. "This is not a combat zone. It is a cleansing." The miniature wedding cake, the bait had arrived at the Nightinglass 7 dock at precisely 10 minutes past midnight. It was the confirmation Ariella needed, and the signal she relayed to Cassian. And it was the exact moment Cassian chose to activate the festival's sound system. His cleansing remark was not just a threat, it was a distraction. His thumb, pressing the side of his phone, had just rerouted the entire audio feed of the Lanterntide Festival. The massive speakers, blocks away on the main promenade, went silent, and then, with a heavy thump of feedback, they switched, slaving themselves to the small, wind-whipped microphone on the church plaza. The plaza was now the largest soundstage in Gullhaven. Elias Crane knew that sound. He had helped design the festival's security protocols. He knew the backup channel. He knew he was trapped. His panic, which had been a cold calculation, now became hot and desperate. He still had Mira's arm in a vice grip. He looked at the plaza, at the OSCO agents who were closing in too slowly, at Cassian, and at the woman in the white dress. He needed an exit. He looked up. The Nightinglass Bridge, the glass walkway that connected the museum to the church roof, it was his private escape route. "This way!" he roared, yanking Mira, not toward the street, but up. He dragged her up the stone service stairs at the side of the church, toward the roof access. "Leo, stop him!" Cassian bellowed to his men. The OSCO agents moved first, but not to intercept. They moved to clear. The team leader barked commands. "Target is moving north. Secure the north embankment, all units. Secure the perimeter. They were not stopping Elias, they were clearing his path, opening the escape route he had been promised. The collusion was naked, arrogant, and happening in real time. A moment later, Elias appeared, high above them, shoving Mira onto the narrow, glass-and-steel bridge. The wind up there was a physical force, shrieking through the cables, making the structure sing. He dragged Mira to the center, a dark silhouette against the storm-lit sky. Rivaro. Elias's voice was thin, ripped apart by the wind. You want her. You want the harbor. Send me the bride. She's the only one I will talk to. Send the bride, and I walk away. He wanted a shield. He wanted the one person Cassian's men would not dare fire at. The remaining crowd on the plaza, seeing the standoff escalate, began to panic, surging toward the exits, blocking the plaza. June raised her voice, not in a shout, but in a command. It was the voice she used at the Mariners' Hall during a triple-booked Saturday night. Back, move back, clear the center against the walls now. She gestured, sharp, broad, slicing motions, not of a bride, but of a traffic controller, a bartender clearing the bar, a paramedic at a scene. The crowd, desperate for direction, obeyed. They pressed back against the buildings, creating a wide, empty corridor of stone directly beneath the bridge. Cassian was at her side, his face a mask of cold, controlled fury. He's too high. Ariella's team cannot get a clean shot. He's exposed, but he has Mira. I will go, June said. It was not a question. He's desperate. He will kill you. He wants the bride, she corrected. Not a corpse. He wants a shield. And he is on a bridge. A bridge has weak points. Cassian looked at her, then up at the structure. He saw it. He slipped his hand into his vest pocket, the same pocket he had touched in the boathouse. He pulled out a small, dark, flat object. It was not a weapon, it was a tool, a thin, curved blade, no longer than his thumb, set in a smooth, worn handle. My father's rigging knife, he said, his voice a low rasp. From the boathouse. You called it a kitchen tool. You know how to use it. He pressed it into her palm. The wood was warm. Her fingers closed around it, and the knife vanished into the folds of her dress. The wind, she said, looking up, her eyes calculating. It is hitting the bridge broadside, the secondary stabilization cables. If one of them were cut, he would lose his footing. The massive clock on the church tower began to groan, the mechanism moving. It was 13 minutes past midnight. I am coming, June shouted, stepping forward. She looked every inch the bride, her dress luminous in the chaos. I am here. I am the traitor. She moved to the side stairs, the ones Elias had taken. June, Cassian said, his voice rough. She paused, looking back. He said nothing, but his eyes were a storm of promises and apologies. She ascended the stairs, emerging onto the cold, wind-lashed roof. The glass bridge stretched out before her. Elias was 20 yards away, a spider in his web. Walk, little bride, he sneered. The clock is ticking. Our sacred truce is almost over. He was right. At 15 minutes past midnight, the sacred vow protection ended. The plaza would become a free fire zone. June stepped onto the bridge. The glass was slick with rain. Beneath her feet, she could see the entire plaza, the tiny figures of Cassian and the Osco agents, the empty corridor she had created. The wind tried to push her, but she planted her feet, a waitress used to carrying heavy trays in a storm. Let her go, Elias, she said, her voice steady. That is the deal. Let Mira go, and you can have me. The deal is whatever I say, he shouted, manic. He pulled Mira tighter, her feet dangling, forcing her against the outer railing. June kept walking, her pace slow, deliberate. She fumbled with the lace mesh veil, pretending the wind was her enemy. I cannot. The wind. She stumbled, her hand flying out to catch her balance. She did not grab the main rail. Her hand, the one holding the veil, landed on a large structural bolt that secured a secondary guide cable, with a movement too fast to be seen. She snagged the lace mesh, hooking it hard onto the bolt head. It was her anchor. It was her pull point. The church clock chimed, the first stroke of 14 minutes past midnight. Elias laughed, watching the clock. "One more minute, bride, and then the party really starts." Far out at sea, a distant, silent flash of lightning illuminated the boiling clouds. Gullhaven, the plaza, the bridge, all held their breath. June's hand, hidden in the folds of her silk dress, closed around the rigging knife. The church clock struck the 15th minute past midnight. The deep bronze chime vibrated through the glass of the bridge. A physical punctuation mark. The truce was over. Elias Crane laughed, a thin, manic sound that the wind tore away. He raised his pistol, not at June, but at the sky. "The party starts now." He fired. The shot was a sharp, explosive crack, painfully loud, echoing off the wet stone. The glass beneath June's feet rang like a tuning fork. The sound of the shot was punctuated by a furious gust of wind. It hit the bridge broadside, exactly as June had prayed it would. This was the moment. She did not hesitate. She did not use the knife. She used the veil. She yanked her head back, putting her full, desperate weight into the movement. The lace snagged on the bolt head, pulled taut. The metal groaned. The secondary guide cable, its housing already weakened, snapped loose. The bridge did not collapse. It lurched, a sickening, sideways drop of 6 inches. Elias caught completely off balance, stumbled, his arms flying wide. He did not fall, but he was vulnerable. Down on the plaza, Cassian saw the lurch, saw June drop to her hands and knees. He did not wait. "June!" He roared her name and charged the stone service stairs, taking them 3 at a time, his only thought to get between her and the threat. He burst onto the roof just as Mira acted. June had given her a signal in the oyster house, a fast, unspoken command heel. "Spin." As Elias staggered, his grip on Mira loosened for a fraction of a second. It was all the girl needed. She drove the hard heel of her shoe straight down onto Elias's wrist. The gun clattered, spinning away across the wet glass. Cassian reached the bridge entrance. "Get away from her!" "Elias!" A second shot rang out, but it was not from the bridge. It came from the plaza. A federal agent, the OSCO team leader, the one who had confronted June. He was not aiming at Elias. He was aiming at Cassian. The bullet tore through the sleeve of Cassian's jacket, a white-hot line of pain grazing his shoulder. He grunted, stumbling back a step. The agent was raising his rifle for a second. Clearer shot, a clean finish. "No!" June screamed. She scrambled back from the bridge, sliding on the wet stone, ignoring the gun, ignoring Elias. She grabbed the plaza microphone, the one she had used for the vow, the one still connected to the entire harbor. She held the button. She did not shout for help. She shouted the code. Anchor Stillwater Channel 5. It was the sequence, the audio key. 2 blocks away, the sound technician at the Mariners Hall, one of June's bartender friends, slammed his hand down on the play button. A massive hiss of static, and then Elias Crane's voice. It was recorded, filtered, but unmistakable, booming from every festival speaker in Gullhaven. "So, the Astrel bait at Nightinglass. OSCO moves in at 12:10. We rescue the girl. We pin Rivaro for the firefight." The plaza went dead silent. The OSCO agent froze, his rifle half raised, his face a mask of horror. Then, a second voice, colder, more official. The OSCO team leader. "Nah." A clean finish. "We take the harbor, we take the girl. And Cassian Rivaro is just a casualty of a rival war. We box the whole harbor by sunrise." The crowd, pressed against the walls, erupted. They were not screaming in fear. They were roaring in rage. Phones were out, recording the recording the OSCO agents' faces. Across the plaza, the Astrel family contingent, who had stayed to watch the chaos, went still. They, too, had been played. They were the designated patsies. "Stand down!" a new voice shouted from the OSCO ranks. A younger agent, his face pale, stepped forward. "Captain Lutz, sir, I will not fire on civilians. I am standing down." He lowered his weapon. Several other agents, seeing their commander's treachery broadcast to the city, did the same. The federal front had shattered. On the bridge, Elias was cornered. The recording was his death warrant. He lunged, ignoring June, ignoring Cassian. He grabbed Mira, his last shield. He dragged her toward the edge, toward the dark, swirling water below. June still had the knife. She had one shot. She did not throw it at him. She threw it at the heavy braided rope of a festival flag hanging from the bridge superstructure. The small, sharp rigging blade bit deep. The rope snapped. A massive canvas banner, the Gullhaven anchor, dropped, falling between Elias and the plaza, a perfect, sudden curtain. "Mira, drop!" June yelled. She grabbed the fire extinguisher mounted by the church door, twisted the pin, and unleashed a thick white fog of carbon dioxide. The bridge, the roof, everything vanished in a cold, suffocating cloud. Through the fog, June moved. She found Elias by his cursing. He was blind, choking. She did not hit. She locked. It was the barback hold, the one used for unruly drunks, wrist, elbow, shoulder, leverage. She slammed his arm against the rail, her weight trapping him. Cassian was right behind her, his left arm useless, his right hand pure iron. He grabbed Elias's other hand, the one clawing at Mira, and secured the weapon. Elias, blinded, trapped, and desperate, twisted, his feet slipping on the slick, fog-covered glass. He went over. He did not fall. The flag line, the one June had cut, snagged his ankle. He dropped 5 feet, then stopped, dangling, upside down, swinging over the plaza, a human pendulum exposed to every camera, every eye. Mira was safe. She scrambled back into Cassian's good arm. The recording finished. The plaza was silent, except for the wind and the sound of Elias weeping. The OSCO team leader, his face gray, barked one final order. "Tactical retreat, all units, pull back, now." The federal agents dissolved into the night. The harbor, for a moment, held its breath. Then, from the boats, a single foghorn sounded. Then another. The model ships, their parade ruined, began to light their flares. The crowd, the harbor folk, began to cheer. June stood, shaking, the empty extinguisher at her feet. The fog cleared. Cassian was there. He let Mira go, and she ran to Ariella, who was emerging from the shadows. He looked at June, said nothing. He just opened his good arm. She fell into him. She buried her face in his chest, her hands gripping his vest. He held her, his hand in her hair, his chin resting on her head, holding her as if she were the only anchor in the world. The paper fireworks, forgotten, exploded overhead, a silent shower of confetti in the rain. He was warm. He was real. She pulled back, just enough to look at him, her hand on his chest, his shoulder. The white silk of her dress, where she had been pressed against him, was stained, a dark, spreading crimson, seeping into the lace of the veil still snagged in her hair, the violence and the vow. Married in a single brutal stain, the traitor was exposed, the harbor was safe, but the night and the choices that came after midnight were far from over. The dawn over Gullhaven Pier was a quiet gray apology. The chaos of the Lanterntide Festival had been washed away by the squall, leaving the air smelling of clean, cold salt and damp wood. The fishing boats, which had been silent witnesses, now chugged out of the harbor, their engines a low, steady heartbeat returning the city to its rhythm. Cassian sat on the top step of a wooden pier, not far from the oyster house. The sun was not yet visible, but its light was turning the undersides of the clouds a pale, bruised purple. His left arm was bound tightly in a sling, his white shirt from the night before replaced with a dark, fresh one, the top buttons undone. The bandage was a stark white against his skin. June found him there. She had changed out of the silk dress, back into her own simple clothes from the Mariner's Hall, but her hair was still damp from the rain. She sat beside him, not too close, leaving a foot of respectful, charged space between them. For a long time, they just watched the water. Elias is being held, Cassian said finally, his voice a low rumble. The old families, including Estrella, are demanding a harbor tribunal. They will deal with him. He will not see the inside of a federal prison, which is a mercy he does not deserve. He will face harbor justice. And Osco, June asked, pulling her knees to her chest. Captain Lutz, the one who stood down, is now in charge. He's cleaning his own house. It seems he was waiting for a chance, and you gave it to him. He turned his head, his dark eyes studying her profile. The gray light was kind, but it could not hide the exhaustion around her eyes. The check for Sun Meadow Home was transferred an hour ago, enough to cover your grandmother's care for the rest of her life, in any facility she chooses. You are free, June. You can walk away. You never have to see this pier, or me, again. He repeated the words from the night before, but the context was entirely new. The family's offer after midnight. June turned, her gaze meeting his. You are just letting me go. I am honoring the deal, he said. You held up your end. You saved my daughter. You saved my harbor. You are free. He looked back at the water. That is one choice. He paused, a heavy, measured beat. The other choice is that you stay. You said the harbor was a big, dirty restaurant, and you exposed its rot. Now, I am asking you to help me clean it. Before June could process the weight of that, two figures approached them on the pier. Mira, her face pale but her eyes clear, and Ariella, holding a leather portfolio. Mira stepped forward and held out a heavy, old-fashioned brass key ring. I wanted to give you these, Mira said, her voice quiet. Papa bought the Mariners' Hall this morning. He said, I said it belongs to you, Cassian interrupted, his eyes still on June. Legally, it is yours, a clean title, a place to build that network of clean jobs you talked about, a place for the harbor folk. June looked at the keys, then at Cassian. Stunned, it was more than security, it was power. Ariella stepped forward and opened the portfolio. We've also drafted a preliminary proposal, she said, her voice all business. The Harbor Clean Ledger, a new system of internal auditing for all vendor contracts, cargo manifests, and cash flow. It would make our dealings transparent. It would require a new position. Director of Coordination. She looked pointedly at June. It is an internal title, but the authority would be absolute. June looked from the keys to the proposal, and finally to Cassian. They were offering her everything. A business, a title, a purpose, and him. She took a deep breath, the cold sea air filling her lungs. I cannot accept, she said. The silence that followed was absolute. Cassian's face hardened, but it was Mira who spoke. But why after everything? I cannot accept like this, and June clarified, her voice gaining strength. You do not buy my loyalty, Mr. Rivaro. You do not buy my expertise. You earn it, and this harbor, she swept her hand out, has not earned it yet. She stood up, walking to the edge of the pier. I will make you an offer, a counter-offer. She turned back. I will accept the keys to the Mariners' Hall on one condition. I will take your new title, and I will give you 90 days, a 90-day trial. Cassian rose slowly, his good arm coming to rest at his side. A trial? 90 days, June said, her voice as hard as the iron cleats on the dock. For you, for the harbor, we implement the ledger, we clean the vendor lists, we create the jobs, we do it my way, with full transparency. And if, at the end of 90 days, I see that you are serious, that this harbor is truly getting clean, I will stay. And if not, he asked, a ghost of a smile playing on his lips. If not, she said, I keep the Mariners' Hall as my severance, and I walk away, and you never see me again. He closed the distance between them. He stood in front of her, the dawn light breaking over his shoulder. He did not smile. He looked at her with a raw, profound respect. Deal, he said. He held out his right hand, the uninjured one. She did not take it. Instead, she looked at his hand, then at his face, and she stepped in. June Marlowe initiated the kiss. It was not the desperate, frantic collision in the boathouse. It was slow, deep, and deliberate. It was a choice. Her hands came up to frame his face, her fingers gentle on his jaw. His good arm, his right arm, snaked around her back, pulling her flush against him, holding her with a possessive, gentle strength. It was a kiss of promises, of negotiations, of sealed pacts. His lips were warm, a stark contrast to the cold morning. She felt the steady beat of his heart under her hands. He held her, and she let herself be held. Just as the first, brilliant ray of sun broke the horizon, painting a line of gold across the water, they broke apart. They did not move far. They rested their foreheads together, their breath mingling in the cold air. She was the first to step back. She picked up the keys from the railing. "I have to open for the morning shift," she said. Cassian nodded. "I have a harbor to run." She walked away, her back straight, not looking back. Far in the distance, the Astrel boats were returning to their docks, a silent retreat. Elias Crane was facing the justice of the tides. And June was walking toward her new restaurant. She reached the Mariner's Hall, the keys cold in her hand. She paused at the door. From her pocket, she pulled the small, torn piece of lace mesh, the prop veil that had become a tool of survival. She did not throw it away. She opened the door, went inside, and hung the scrap of lace on a hook in the office. A memento. June Marlowe stood at the window, looking out at the water, at the harbor. She now, in part, commanded. Freedom, she realized, was not just about being free from want. It was about the right to choose. And today, after midnight, she had chosen. She had chosen to stay. She had chosen to fight. And she had chosen the man who had been willing to take a bullet for her. Thank you so much for listening to our story. We would love to connect with you. So please comment below and let us know where you are listening from and share your thoughts. Please subscribe to our channel, Mafia Boss Story, and like this video. You can also show your support by hitting the hype button, so this story in this video can be heard by many more people.